Feels like there's a lot of World War III propaganda percolating out there in the news these days. We've got this story, Chinese gate crashers at U.S. bases sparking espionage concerns. We've got Kim Jong-un meeting with Vladimir Putin in Russia to discuss anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. And the Russians are threatening, apparently, to nuke the United States if we get more involved. And so, man, all of the media apparatchik are just going in overdrive telling us about all these stories. And then we have this representative who's over on the media defining all of these people as the new axis of evil. And we've heard that phrase before back during Iraq when that effort failed epically. And they told us that we were going to find a bunch of stuff that we never did. So all of the people are moving around. You can see all of the stories are starting to diffuse throughout the media. The Wall Street Journal has this one. Chinese gate crashers at U.S. bases spark espionage concerns. And I have no doubt about this, that there are concerns from the Chinese. No doubt about that. But our government is supposed to be competent and not have concerns about this and make sure that this stuff is taken care of. Of course, we know that our government is not capable of protecting us because they said that they could help us with the pandemic. They said they could help us with fires and national emergencies, and they fail every single time. So what are we to do about it? Well, they're going to tell us that it's a giant problem and somebody's got to do something about it. What does that lead to? Probably World War III. Chinese gate crashers are now probing U.S. bases, sometimes posing as tourists. They've accessed military bases and other sensitive sites in the U.S. as many as 100 times in recent years. U.S. officials are describing this incident as a potential espionage threat. DoD, FBI, other agencies held a review last year to try to limit these incidents, which involve people whom officials have dubbed gate crashers because of their attempts, either by accident or intentionally, to get onto U.S. military bases without authorization. They range from Chinese nationals found crossing into U.S. missile ranges in New Mexico to what appeared to be scuba divers swimming in murky waters near a U.S. government rocket launch site in Florida. The incidents, which U.S. officials describe as a form of espionage, appear designed to test security practices at U.S. military installations to see how the government will respond. Just probing, and probing. Concern over the base intrusions come amid rising tensions amid a Chinese spy balloon that has flown over the country. Incident also casts light on concerns that Beijing is using non-traditional means to gather intelligence. White House, DHS declining to comment. FBI just said, the Chinese government is engaged in broad, diverse campaign of theft and malign influence without regard to laws or international norms that the FBI will not tolerate. Okay, I'm sure. They're very busy rounding up the J6ers to care too much about Chinese spies. The Chinese embassy in Washington challenged the view. They say, no, these are ill-intentioned fabrications. We urge the relevant officials to abandon the Cold War mentality, stop the groundless accusations, and more. Jason Crow, a member of the Intelligence Committee, said that we're concerned that these cases are going to fall between the cracks. We need to work closely with everybody. Some incursions are benign. People say they're following Google Maps, and they just happen to end up at a military base. Other are more troubling. Some claim that they're tourists. They try to push past guards in Alaska, saying they had reservations at a commercial hotel. Cases happening in rural areas. There's little tourism there. The individuals are using what looks like scripted language when confronted with security guards. When stopped, they just say, no, we're just tourists. We're just lost here. Yeah, very curious. So is our incapable government going to be able to do anything about this? I sure hope so, but the base penetrations are concerning and a growing trend. They're often cited criminally, barred from future contact at the bases, but a review of the 1,400 bases says every day there are more than 10,000 controlled turnarounds of individuals at bases. Other incidents are pretty serious. In other situations, individuals have used drones to bolster their surveillance effort. And so this Cold War is just continuing to get hotter and hotter. And meanwhile, we now know that Vladimir Putin, the man who was supposed to be obliterated by the West sanctions overnight because of the moral authority that the Biden administration claims to have, he's now meeting with Kim Jong-un, which is very curious, to discuss sending North Korean anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. But only if they exchange some technology. And we already saw that Putin hung out with President Xi and that they palled together and they said that we're going to create a new agreement that's going to last 100 years, or it's going to change history, whatever they said. Kim Jong-un plans to travel to Russia this month to hold a leader-level diplomatic engagement. officials say that Kim, who rarely travels outside of his country, is going to go and meet with Putin. Moscow's taken steps to strengthen its ties, comes after Shoigu traveled to Pyongyang last month. And so all of these people are starting to organize. We've also got BRICS, right, which is the alternative to the United States dollar to settle international transactions they're working on. Last week, the White House said Russia was already in secret active talks with the North Koreans. They've said, we warn publicly armed negotiations between Russia and North Korea are actively advancing. Watson said on Monday that the United States urged North Korea to cease its arms negotiations and abide by public commitments. Or what? The White House also reported last week that it had an intelligence indicating that Putin and Kim swapped letters. More at the surface level. John Kirby knows what the letters said. It's incredible. The letters were more at the surface level. So he's just reading the letters that are being sent. He also claimed that despite its denials, North Korea supplied infantry rockets and missiles to Russia. And our government just is like, well, we just keep spending more money. And surely this will solve everything. White House didn't respond to a request for comment because what are they going to say? Nothing. We also see this. Newsmax is reporting that Russia's state TV warns the United States a nuclear strike will happen. Here's the story. Russian state TV host has warned that if the Ukraine war escalates to a, quote, nuclear phase, the Kremlin will strike the U.S. with nuclear weapons as it's in its crosshairs. And it's like, come on. I sure hope not, because that would be basically the end of the world, right? If we start lobbing nukes at each other, not going to go well for anybody. That's the one feature of mutually assured destruction. If both sides got the nukes, maybe that's the end of everything. Now, again, if this is an existential crisis for Russia, as they say it is, maybe they're willing to cross that threshold. Russian political commentator and president of the Institute made the warning in a clip that's now gone viral. The advisor to Ukraine Internal Affairs Ministry shared the clip on Twitter. This comes after Putin, who was set to begin deploying tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus before a NATO summit to be held in a neighboring country. The Russian state TV person said, the question is, will it all reach the nuclear phase or not? Because if it keeps going like this, it will definitely happen. And it won't be tactical nuclear weapons that will be striking at Ukraine, believe me. The United States of America and all the targets that need to be in the crosshairs. Ooh. They have been there since the Soviet times, and those in the United States and those in Europe and those in places where America's nuclear weapons are concentrated, where there are military bases. So I wish that on the way to the nuclear phase, we could finish off the enemy without crossing the Rubicon. But if we have to, what can we do? Since Russia invaded in 2022, commentators have said that they're prepared to use these. And of course, right, this is what they're saying. And so they're just talking, right? I think a lot of this is just, war propaganda. And the question is, where is it coming from? Is it really coming from the Russians, or is this coming from, other people who want to see World War III? There's a lot of people that would love to see U.S. versus Russia. Right now, it's a proxy war, but it's just a proxy war because they can't do it openly. But if they could have Russia start needling the West and something big happens that causes this to turn from a proxy war into a much hotter war that involves other nation states, that could be a pretty big problem. And some people are very excited about it. In fact, this guy is using this regurgitated phrase, talking about the axis of evil now being recreated. And we know that that led to Iraq and Afghanistan. And we know that that was a phrase that came out of World War II, the evil empire, the Axis powers, right? And we're going back down the same path yet again.
Serves on the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good morning to you. It is incredibly rare for Kim Jong-un to leave the country, but now we're hearing he's going to take a trip to Russia to talk about a possible arms deal. Put this development into perspective for us.
Well, this has been in the works for a while. The Russian Defense Minister Shoigu visited Pyongyang, about a month ago to set this deal up. And look, this is significant in a couple of ways. One, I'm not as worried about the equipment. North Korea has been stockpiling and using Russian-made equipment for 70 years in its military dictatorship. But I'm very worried about the amount of ammunition that they could provide, particularly artillery. And they can provide thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds that will allow Russia to stretch the war out in Ukraine. And if it settles down into a stalemate, if the Ukrainian counteroffensive breaks down and is not effective, this will allow Putin to absolutely continue the war. And then the other thing, Carly, is this is an extension of the unholy alliance of Iran, China, Russia, and North Korea, the new axis of evil, and I'm not seeing anything in terms of a strategy from the Biden administration.
I remember that phrase a lot when I was in high school, and I kept hearing them say that over and over again, the axis of evil, the axis of evil. And you know what? I bought a lot of that crap. These people attacked our buildings, and they really exploited that for the rest of my life, our lives, right? They just jumped into that and exploited that with both hands.
To drive wedges in between the axis of evil here, to disrupt what's going on, this new alliance, you basically just see kind of a shoulder shrug from the White House.
Well, you mentioned China, and there's this big report out of the Wall Street Journal that says that Chinese nationals, sometimes posing as tourists, have gained access to military bases as many as 100 times over the last few years. And the report says that these incidents range from Chinese nationals found crossing into a U.S. missile range in New Mexico to what appears to be scuba divers swimming in murky waters near a U.S. government rocket launch site in Florida. And when they get caught, they all use the same scripted language. They say that they're tourists who lost their way, even though they're in rural parts of the country where no tourists would go. So how serious this? What sort of information are they trying to obtain, and have any of them been successful?
No, it's incredibly serious, Carly, and this is just part of the avalanche of espionage, of Chinese espionage that we are under right now, whether it's cyber, whether it's the spy balloon, whether it's new spy bases in Cuba, taking a play right out of the Soviet Union's old playbook, or these, what the Chinese call non-traditional collectors, that they are just throwing as many out there as they can to kind of see what sticks and see what they can collect. And a lot of these people are being coerced, whether they're researchers, students, or these air quotes, tourists, because if they don't do it, their Chinese families suffer back home. Wow. That's how they force them to do it. But the problem,
I think that is probably true. I think there's no doubt that we're living in a world where this stuff is happening very aggressively. And I would imagine the Chinese are using every single tool at their disposal in order to create these opportunities for themselves. But I have a lot of doubt that our government is capable of identifying them and repelling them, because they're just not talking about it, right? They're not focused on this problem. They're focused on climate change, Ukraine, and they're focused on not this. I mean, they almost never even actually talk about China. Both parties, for crying out loud. Mitch McConnell says nothing about it. Kevin McCarthy's very quiet about all of it.
The problem is, Carly, what's the consequences from the Biden administration? Nothing. They get more and more meetings from more cabinet secretaries. And so the message that they're getting in Beijing is, there's no downside to doing this. Let's do more. And that's why you're seeing such an increase. There's no consequences.
And you can imagine how an American would be treated in China if an American was found near a Chinese military base. Meanwhile, these Chinese suspected spies are getting just trespassing violations, which is essentially a parking ticket. So something definitely needs to happen there.
We'll see what the Congress does about it, if they have any action or recourse or plan. Thus far, haven't seen much from them. They're too busy worried about January 6th and insurrectionary extremists. But a lot of activity out there. Is the Biden White House going to respond to it? Doubt it, but we'll continue to cover.